Dirty Russian money funds your campaign, Nigel. Keir Starmer's accusation cut across the tense BBC studio. And your spies listened to our calls, Keir. Nigel Farage roared back, his face crimson. Millions watched, captivated, as the Prime Minister and his populist nemesis tore strips off each other live on air. Then the chilling message from the hackers, True Brit, flashed onto the screens behind them. Time is running out. Truth will out. A wave of panic rippled through the studio. Two leaders, forced into this public arena by blackmail, now faced mutually assured destruction. Their darkest secrets held hostage by an unseen enemy, while the nation watched, breathless. The late evening calm of May 2025 shattered as news alerts began flashing across screens in Westminster and beyond. BBC News, Sky News, newspaper websites, all exploded simultaneously with the same story. A hitherto unknown hacker group calling itself True Brit had breached secure government servers and dumped a massive cache of data onto the dark web, accompanied by a manifesto decrying government overreach. Initial headlines sent shockwaves through the political establishment. Leak bombshell. Starmer government docs reveal censorship. Coordination with metaverse platforms. Zrenia. Operation Nightingale exposed. MI5 surveillance of Nigel Farage, allegedly sanctioned by Downing Street. Phones rang incessantly in ministerial offices. A sense of shock, then dawning panic, gripped Whitehall. The True Brit manifesto claimed this was merely the first tranche, promising more revelations. Deep within the leaked files, cybersecurity analysts quickly noted, lay heavily encrypted folders, their contents unknown, adding a layer of menace to the unfolding crisis. Miles away, in a pub in Clacton, Nigel Farage watched the breaking news on a flickering screen above the bar. A slow grin spread across his face. He raised his pint. To democracy, he boomed to the regulars nearby. The real fun is just beginning. By morning, Nigel Farage was holding court before a hastily assembled press conference, radiating righteous indignation. He brandished printouts, supposedly excerpts from the True Brit leak, jabbing a finger at highlighted paragraphs. Keir Starmer, Farage thundered, his voice resonating with practiced outrage. This man who lectures us all on decency, on the rule of law. He is a traitor to British democracy. His government conspires with unaccountable foreign tech giants. Metaverse platforms, chattersphere, to silence dissent, to censor ordinary Britons who dare to question his failing policies. He paused for effect, letting the accusation sink in. And worse, Operation Nightingale. They put me, a private citizen, a broadcaster, under state surveillance. Why? Because I dared challenge their disastrous open-door immigration policies? Because I spoke inconvenient truths about the economy? Or was it simply because I mentioned, years ago, perfectly reasonable points about NATO expansion and Russia? He called the alleged spying politically motivated, authoritarian. He demanded Starmer's resignation, immediate protests, an early general election. The timing, the narrator noted, could not have been worse for the Prime Minister. It was May 2025. Starmer's Labour government, elected with high hopes, was struggling. Opinion polls showed his approval rating languishing at -41%, according to YouGov. Reform UK, under Farage's de facto leadership, had scored stunning recent by-election victories in Runcorn and Helsby, eroding Labour's already slim 6-seat majority. The economy remained sluggish, illegal immigration figures were high, and public services felt strained. Farage, sensing weakness, masterfully exploited the leak. He hinted he possessed further details about precisely which ministers ordered the alleged censorship and surveillance, calling on patriotic civil servants and tech employees to come forward as whistleblowers. Within hours, the first small groups of protesters gathered outside Parliament, their handmade signs reading, "Stop Starmer's spying," and "Hands off free speech." An emergency COBRA meeting convened in the underground bunker beneath Whitehall. Keir Starmer sat at the head of the table, his expression tightly controlled, but his knuckles white where he gripped his pen. The leak was a disaster, threatening to derail his government's agenda and potentially his premiership. Around the table, his senior ministers looked grim. The Home Secretary outlined the known facts of the breach, sophisticated, extensive. Starmer listened intently, then gave his directives. The public line was to be firm, unwavering. Deny specifics, condemn the leak as an attack on national security, and immediately point the finger outwards. "This is a complex, hostile information operation," Starmer stated, his voice level but cold, "designed to destabilize this government and undermine public trust. The methods bear the hallmarks of foreign state actors, likely Russia, seeking to disrupt the passage of vital legislation like the Digital Safety Act." He turned to the attending director of GCHQ. "Your priority is twofold: find True Brit and find the evidence linking them to Moscow. Urgently." He instructed the Home Secretary and other ministers to prepare statements emphasizing the national security implications and the danger posed by foreign interference. During a tense pause, the Home Secretary leaned forward. "Keir," she asked directly, her voice low, "was there any sanctioned surveillance of Farage, under any operational name, related to national security concerns about his past comments?" Starmer met her gaze, but didn't answer directly. "All security operations," he replied carefully, "are conducted strictly within the legal framework and subject to appropriate oversight." Later, the GCHQ director reported privately to Starmer, "The hack was highly professional, attribution would be difficult and time-consuming, but preliminary digital forensics suggested non-Russian origins, possibly domestic or another state actor." Starmer listened, then repeated his instruction. "Focus on the Russian angle for public consumption. We need to control the narrative." The strategy was set: denial, deflection, and the specter of a foreign enemy. The timing of the True Brit leak seemed deliberately aimed at derailing a key piece of government legislation, the controversial Digital Safety and Sovereignty Act. This bill, championed by Starmer's government, proposed significantly enhanced powers for GCHQ and MI5 to monitor online communications in the name of national security and combating hostile state disinformation. Crucially, it also placed new legal obligations on major technology companies operating in the UK, like the ubiquitous Metaverse platforms, owner of Insight and FaceSpace, and the microblogging site Chattersphere, requiring them to proactively identify and remove content deemed harmful, including vaguely defined categories like foreign-sponsored misinformation and material undermining democratic institutions. Critics had already voiced concerns about the bill's potential impact on free speech and privacy. Now the True Brit leak, alleging existing collusion between the government and these very tech giants to censor critics and spy on political opponents, poured fuel on the fire. Nigel Farage immediately seized on the connection. "This bill isn't about safety," he declared at another impromptu press conference. "It's about legalizing the very tyranny Starmer's government is already practicing in secret. They want to silence anyone who disagrees." Civil liberties groups echoed his concerns. Caught in the crossfire, the UK CEOs of Metaverse platforms and Chattersphere issued near-identical, carefully worded statements, professing their commitment to user privacy while emphasizing their legal obligations to cooperate with government requests within the established legal frameworks on matters of national security. The statements satisfied no one. Then came another blow. A junior employee at Metaverse, communicating anonymously through encrypted channels, leaked an internal company directive to a Guardian journalist. The memo outlined a new policy for proactively identifying and reducing the visibility of content originating from accounts associated with Reform UK, labeling it potentially problematic even before any specific government requests were received. The narrative of state-sponsored censorship, facilitated by compliant tech giants, gained powerful momentum. Facing mounting pressure and seeing the narrative slipping away, Keir Starmer and his advisors decided on a risky counterattack: turn the focus onto Nigel Farage's own controversial associations. Using carefully selected data, apparently originating from the True Brit leak itself, though its provenance remained murky, Number 10 orchestrated a discreet leak to The Times. The story, published prominently, detailed significant donations to Reform UK, channeled through a Cyprus-based shell company named Nicomed Holdings. The article meticulously traced Nicomed's ownership back to a notorious Anglo-Russian oligarch, currently under UK and EU sanctions for his alleged support of Russia's war effort in Ukraine. Armed with this information, Starmer went on the offensive during Prime Minister's questions. Foregoing his usual methodical style, he launched a furious, almost visceral attack, not directly at Farage, who wasn't an MP, but aimed pointedly at the handful of Reform UK MPs sitting opposite. "Can the honourable members tell this House," Starmer demanded, his voice ringing with indignation. Why their party, which claims to speak for Britain, is funded by dirty money funneled through Cyprus from a sanctioned oligarch who profits from Putin's illegal war. Whose interests are they really serving? The attack was designed to paint Farage and Reform as hypocrites, potentially compromised by Kremlin-linked money. But the counterattack spectacularly backfired. Farage convened an immediate press conference, laughing off Starmer's accusations with practiced ease. Desperate stuff from a desperate prime minister, Farage scoffed, grinning triumphantly. While his government spies on British citizens, he tries to smear me with ancient history about a donor who, by the way, is a known opponent of Putin and supported us because we're the only party standing up for Brexit Britain. This is pathetic deflection. Crucially, most media outlets agreed. While reporting the details of the Nicomed Holdings connection, their lead stories remained firmly focused on the far more explosive allegations of government surveillance and censorship. Starmer's gamble had failed. Instead of changing the subject, he looked weak, reactive, and increasingly desperate, having fired his best shot only to see it glance harmlessly off Farage's Teflon armor. The political storm raging in Westminster quickly spilled onto the streets. The small knot of protesters outside Parliament grew daily, fueled by Farage's relentless media appearances and the government's perceived evasiveness. Supporters of Reform UK mingled with civil liberties. Activists, anti-censorship campaigners, and ordinary citizens angered by the revelations of state surveillance. Placards bobbed above the crowd. Starmer, Big Brother is watching you. Logically, my thoughts are not state secrets. Zrenia, stop Labour's censorship machine. The mood was angry, defiant. Nigel Farage occasionally made appearances, addressing the crowds from makeshift platforms, his rhetoric whipping up enthusiasm. The pressure on Keir Starmer intensified. The leader of the Conservative opposition, sensing an opportunity to wound the government, formally demanded a full independent parliamentary inquiry into the True Brit leak and the allegations against ministers and security services. More worryingly for Starmer, cracks began appearing within his own party. A prominent Labour MP, associated with the party's traditional civil libertarian wing, gave an interview pointedly calling for complete transparency from the Prime Minister regarding Operation Nightingale and any government communications with tech platforms. We cannot defend the indefensible, the MP stated gravely. Sunlight is the best disinfectant. Behind the scenes, rumours swirled through Whitehall. Whispers circulated that the embattled Home Secretary, whose department oversaw MI5, was being lined up as the potential fall guy should the scandal require a high-profile sacrifice. Adding to the tension, one afternoon, a larger protest march towards Downing Street resulted in brief but ugly scuffles with police lines, leading to several arrests. The images of shouting protesters clashing with officers further damaged the government's image and amplified the sense of crisis enveloping Starmer's administration. While the political battle raged publicly, behind the scenes, two separate investigations proceeded under intense pressure. At GCHQ headquarters in Cheltenham, cyber intelligence analysts worked around the clock, dissecting the digital fingerprints left by True Brit. They confirmed the sophistication of the initial breach, suggesting a highly skilled group or state actor. However, the specific malware signatures and operational techniques didn't align with known Russian or Chinese hacking units. Increasingly, suspicion fell on either a well-resourced domestic group with insider knowledge or, more worryingly, a false flag operation conducted by a third-party state aiming to sow discord within the UK. Compounding the mystery, GCHQ analysts discovered forensic evidence suggesting that the specific data tranche detailing Farage's funding through Nicomed Holdings had different metadata markers. It seemed to have been injected into the main leaked archive after the initial breach, possibly from an entirely separate source. This pointed towards a complex, multi-layered operation with potentially conflicting motives. Meanwhile, investigative journalists at the BBC and The Guardian painstakingly worked to verify the leaked documents related to government communications with tech companies. A senior BBC political correspondent, using trusted sources within Chattersphere, managed to confirm that the government had indeed flagged one specific post by Nigel Farage for review, but the source insisted the request was formally logged and ultimately actioned by the platform based on a clear violation of its existing policies against hate speech, not due to direct political censorship orders. Simultaneously, a reporter for The Times, digging into the Nicomed Holdings connection, uncovered flight manifests and hotel records confirming that Nigel Farage had personally met with a known representative of the Cyprus-based company during a trip to Geneva 6 months prior, contradicting Farage's initial claims of having no direct dealings with the organization. The fragmented pieces of the puzzle were slowly emerging, painting a picture far more complex and murky than the simple narratives pushed by either Starmer or Farage. Caught squarely in the middle of the political firestorm were the tech giants themselves, metaverse platforms and Chattersphere. Both companies were summoned to appear before closed-door sessions of the relevant Parliamentary Select Committee. Their UK chief executives arrived flanked by lawyers, navigating a treacherous path between placating an angry government, demanding cooperation on national security, and appeasing a public increasingly suspicious of corporate censorship and data sharing. Their testimony was a masterclass in calculated ambiguity. Yes, they confirmed, they routinely cooperated with lawful government requests regarding serious crime and national security threats, as required by UK law. No, they insisted, they did not engage in politically motivated censorship. All content moderation decisions were based solely on their own publicly available community standards and terms of service. When pressed about the specific allegations in the True Brit leak regarding the removal or suppression of political content critical of the government, they demurred, citing user privacy and the confidentiality of government communications. However, under persistent questioning from MPs, the CEO of Metaverse Platforms UK let slip a crucial admission, acknowledging the existence of informal liaison channels with certain government departments for discussing emerging online threats and problematic content narratives. He quickly tried to qualify the statement, but the damage was done. Nigel Farage immediately seized on the admission as proof of a secret censorship pact. Adding fuel to the fire, another anonymous leak, this time apparently from a disgruntled engineer within Metaverse, provided documents to a tech news website detailing an internal algorithm designed to deprioritize and reduce the algorithmic reach of certain political viewpoints flagged as potentially destabilizing, a tool allegedly developed in response to requests from multiple governments, including potentially the UK. The tech giants, desperately trying to appear neutral, found themselves increasingly implicated, trusted by neither side, and facing intense scrutiny over their immense power to shape public discourse. The pressure cooker atmosphere outside Westminster began to permeate the cabinet room itself. Keir Starmer's attempts to maintain a united front started to fray as internal disagreements over the handling of the crisis intensified. During one particularly tense cabinet meeting, the Home Secretary argued forcefully that Operation Nightingale, the surveillance of Farage, was entirely justified based on legitimate national security concerns arising from his past statements and known contacts, insisting MI5 had acted appropriately and within the law. She made it implicitly clear she would resign if her department was made the scapegoat. Conversely, the Chancellor of the Exchequer expressed deep anxiety about the economic fallout, warning that the escalating scandal and the government's perceived antagonism towards tech platforms were spooking investors and could damage the UK's vital digital economy. Other ministers, nervously eyeing plummeting poll numbers and angry emails from constituents, worried about the sheer political toxicity of the situation, particularly the perception of snooping on political opponents. Leaks about these heated exchanges began appearing in the press, painting a picture of a government divided and a leader struggling to maintain control. Starmer's senior political advisor reportedly floated the idea of subtly shifting blame onto the previous Conservative administration, suggesting that perhaps some of the initial surveillance protocols were put in place before Labour took office. This led to frantic digging through transition documents. A potentially crucial discovery was made. While Starmer had been briefed on Operation Nightingale and hadn't stopped it, the original formal authorization warrant had indeed been signed by a senior official under the previous government, citing concerns over foreign influence. This offered Starmer a potential shield, but deploying it would be politically risky, inviting accusations of buck passing and further alienating the security services. The internal blame game had begun. Just as it seemed the crisis might be settling into a grim stalemate of claim and counterclaim, TrueBrit struck again. A second, smaller data dump appeared online, accompanied by another cryptic manifesto promising further revelations. This new batch contained internal emails exchanged between senior advisors within number 10 Downing Street. The correspondence, dated shortly after Reform UK's surprise by-election victories, detailed discussions about potential media strategies to neutralise Farage's influence and aggressively counter his narratives, including proposals to feed negative stories about him to friendly journalists and coordinate social media pushback. While not explicitly illegal, the emails painted an unflattering picture of politically motivated plotting against an opponent. Simultaneously, the journalist from The Times, who had been digging into the murky world of political finance, published a follow-up piece. While unable to definitively prove the Nicomed Holdings' money directly influenced Farage's policies, she uncovered evidence suggesting the funds were used specifically to finance Reform UK's aggressive online advertising campaigns, raising further questions about transparency. The double blow intensified the pressure on both Starmer and Farage. The new leak regarding Starmer's aides fueled accusations of dirty tricks, while the confirmation of Farage's meeting with the oligarch's representative kept uncomfortable questions about his funding alive. Adding another twist, cybersecurity analysts examining the second True Brit leak noted subtle differences in coding style, suggesting this batch might have originated from a different source than the first, perhaps even someone within Starmer's own disgruntled team seeking to damage him further. The crisis deepened, morphing into a complex hall of mirrors where motives were obscured and trust was evaporating. The Conservative leader seized the moment, formally tabling a motion of no confidence in Starmer's government in the House of Commons. The nation felt increasingly fractured, caught in the crossfire between a besieged Prime Minister and a resurgent populist challenger. Keir Starmer, facing a potential no-confidence vote and hemorrhaging public support, decided to address the nation directly from the historic Cabinet Room in number 10 Downing Street. His speech, delivered under the harsh glare of television lights, was a sombre defence of his government's actions. He spoke of the complex threats facing Britain, hostile state actors, pervasive disinformation, the need to balance security with liberty. He framed Operation Nightingale not as political spying, but as a necessary legally sanctioned measure undertaken to assess potential foreign influence risks associated with a prominent public figure. Citing Farage's past controversial statements, he defended the Digital Safety Act as vital for protecting democracy. His tone was measured, loyally, appealing to reason, responsibility, and the gravity of the threats. Yet, despite the careful wording, he sounded defensive, strained. Miles away, under the grey London sky, Nigel Farage stood on a makeshift stage, erected in Trafalgar Square, addressing a vast, cheering crowd, waving Union Jacks and Reform UK banners. His speech was pure political theatre, passionate, defiant, laced with anger and humour. He ridiculed Starmer's address. He talks about threats. The biggest threat is him in number 10. He denounced the establishment snakes, the lying media, the Brussels puppets, and the spooks hiding in Whitehall. He spoke of freedom, of the right to speak your mind, the right to have a pint without worrying if Keir Starmer is listening in. He cast himself as the voice of the silenced majority, the defender of common sense against an out-of-touch authoritarian elite. While Starmer spoke of protocols and intelligence assessments from within the wood-panelled formality of Downing Street, Farage roared about betrayal and liberty amidst the raw energy of the crowd. It felt like two different Britons regarding each other with incomprehension and hostility across the divide, beamed into living rooms across the nation. As Starmer concluded his address, a sudden power flicker momentarily plunged the cabinet room into near darkness. A technical glitch, perhaps, or something more sinister. In Trafalgar Square, Farage, sensing the mood, ended his speech with a rousing call for peaceful, determined civil disobedience until Starmer resigned. That evening, snap polls revealed a public deeply divided, distrustful of both leaders, and increasingly anxious about the country's direction. The following days saw the government crisis deepen into a chaotic stalemate. Keir Starmer narrowly survived the Conservative-led motion of no confidence, but only after making significant concessions to rebellious backbenchers within his own party, particularly those from the civil libertarian wing concerned about the Digital Safety Act and the spying allegations. His authority felt significantly weakened. Nigel Farage, emboldened, continued his campaign of rallies and media appearances, relentlessly hammering the government on the twin themes of censorship and surveillance. Protests, though smaller, continued sporadically outside Parliament. Meanwhile, GCHQ analysts, working under intense pressure, reported confidentially to Number 10 that they now suspected the TrueBrit operation was likely orchestrated by a sophisticated non-state actor with possible links to disgruntled former intelligence operatives, though concrete proof remained elusive. They also confirmed with high confidence that the Farage funding data leak was a separate intrusion, cleverly piggybacked onto the main breach. The source remained unknown, potentially domestic. Investigative journalists continued digging. A BBC correspondent managed to get an off-the-record confirmation from a second source at metaverse platforms that government officials had indeed held regular informal briefings, where lists of problematic accounts and narratives, including some linked to Reform UK, were discussed, though direct takedown orders were denied. Simultaneously, The Times published further details about the complex web of offshore companies surrounding Nicomed Holdings, suggesting the sanctioned oligarch's involvement was deeper than Farage admitted, though still stopping short of proving illegal activity or direct Kremlin control. The political atmosphere remained toxic, with claim and counterclaim flying, further eroding public trust in all institutions. Starmer looked increasingly isolated, struggling to regain the political initiative. Just as it seemed the crisis might settle into a prolonged war of attrition, TrueBrit re-emerged with chilling effect. A new message appeared on the same secure channels used for the initial leaks. It wasn't another data dump, but an ultimatum. Addressing both Keir Starmer and Nigel Farage directly, the message stated that TrueBrit possessed a final, highly damaging cache of encrypted data. This data, they claimed, contained irrefutable proof of compromising secret dealings by both leaders, evidence of Starmer's private assurances to tech lobbyists regarding the watering down of privacy protections in the Digital Safety Act, and detailed records of Farage's previously undisclosed financial arrangements with foreign backers beyond the Nicomed connection. TrueBrit demanded that Starmer and Farage agree to a live, head-to-head television debate within 72 hours, moderated by an independent panel, where they would be forced to answer specific questions posed by TrueBrit itself regarding the leaks. Failure to agree, the message warned, would result in the immediate public release of the entire final data cache. Mutually assured destruction, the message concluded ominously. The ultimatum sent shockwaves through Westminster. The media went into overdrive. Public pressure mounted intensely on both leaders to face each other and address the allegations head-on. After frantic, behind-the-scenes consultations and facing unbearable pressure, both Starmer and Farage, cornered and desperate to prevent the release of potentially career-ending information, reluctantly agreed. The BBC cleared its schedules for an emergency prime-time debate. GCHQ analysts worked furiously, now suspecting the ultimatum might be a bluff or a trap laid by a foreign intelligence service seeking to engineer maximum chaos. Both leaders retreated with their teams, preparing for a televised showdown that felt less like a debate and more like a high-stakes hostage negotiation, each armed with devastating ammunition against the other, unsure if their opponent, or the unseen hackers, held the trigger. The atmosphere in the BBC studio was electric, the tension almost unbearable. Millions across Britain, and indeed the world, tuned in for the unprecedented live debate between Prime Minister Keir Starmer and Reform UK's Nigel Farage, held under the shadow of the TrueBrit ultimatum. Starmer entered looking grave, statesmanlike, attempting to project calm authority. Farage strode in with his familiar confident swagger, playing to the small studio audience. The moderator, a veteran BBC political anchor, laid out the unusual ground rules, including questions submitted electronically by the mysterious TrueBrit. Starmer began by emphasizing the need for responsibility, the rule of law, the complex threats facing the nation that necessitated difficult measures like the Digital Safety Act and security surveillance. He condemned the illegal leaks while subtly trying to justify the government's actions. Farage immediately countered, accusing Starmer of Orwellian overreach, of treating ordinary Britons like suspects, of using national security as a cloak for political censorship. "You talk about threats, Keir," Farage boomed. "But the biggest threat to freedom in this country tonight is sitting right there in number 10. The exchanges grew increasingly sharp, personal. Starmer repeatedly pressed Farage on his funding. "You wrap yourself in the flag, Nigel, but whose money are you taking? Who are you really working for?" Farage fired back. "While you obsess about my donors, your spies are listening to our phone calls. You've built a surveillance state, Keir." The moderator struggled to maintain control as they traded blows. Suddenly, a message flashed across the large screens behind them, purportedly from True Brit. Empty denials. The clock is ticking. The truth will emerge. A gasp went through the studio. Panic flickered in the eyes of the production crew. In the midst of this chaos, Farage launched into an unrelated inflammatory tirade about immigration levels. A comment so extreme it seemed to momentarily alienate even some of his own potential sympathizers. The debate spiraled, ending not with clear arguments or solutions, but in a maelstrom of accusations, threats, and palpable anxiety about what True Brit might do next. No one seemed to have won. The nation merely felt more divided and apprehensive. The chaotic debate left the country teetering on the brink. The threat of a final devastating data dump from True Brit felt terrifyingly real. In the immediate aftermath, frantic, secret negotiations began. Senior figures from the Labour government, the Conservative opposition, and intermediaries trusted by Nigel Farage engaged in urgent back-channel discussions, seeking a way to de-escalate the crisis and, perhaps, persuade True Brit to hold back. Was a political compromise possible that might satisfy the hackers' apparent desire to expose hypocrisy on both sides? As talks continued under intense secrecy, True Brit sent one final ambiguous message: judgment is deferred, not cancelled, before their communication channels went silent. Whether they had been bluffing, were disrupted by GCHQ, or achieved their aim of maximum disruption remained unclear. Seizing the fragile calm, a cross-party consensus rapidly formed around a face-saving solution. The Digital Safety and Sovereignty Act was hastily amended, significantly strengthening parliamentary oversight and independent review mechanisms for surveillance powers, and passed with broad support. Simultaneously, the government announced the immediate establishment of a fully independent, judge-led inquiry tasked with investigating both the allegations of government surveillance and censorship, and the sources and propriety of funding for Reform UK and other political entities. The inquiry's remit was broad, its timeline long, effectively kicking the most explosive issues into the long grass. Keir Starmer remained Prime Minister, his government bruised and battered, but intact. Nigel Farage claimed victory, declaring the weakened act, and the inquiry proved his point. Though the questions surrounding his own finances lingered, the immediate crisis subsided, but the scars remained. Public trust in politicians, security services, and tech companies was further eroded. The True Brit affair served as a chilling reminder of the vulnerability of modern democracies to information warfare and the deep, volatile divisions within British society. The political battles would continue, but under the shadow of a crisis that had pushed the system perilously close to the edge.